Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, and everyone who's joining us today for this special high-level event about advancing the complementary implementation of the Global Compact on Refugees and the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration. My name is Jane McAdam, and I'm a Professor of Law at the University of New South Wales in Sydney and the Director of the Kaldor Centre for International Refugee Law at that university. It is a great privilege and honour to be moderating this afternoon's event. The commitments made by UN member states towards refugees and migrants led to the adoption in 2016 of the New York Declaration on Refugees and Migrants. This, in turn, provided the impetus for the 2018 Global Compact on Refugees, the GCR, and the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration, the GCM. The New York Declaration stated that while their treatment is governed by separate legal frameworks, refugees and migrants have the same universal human rights and fundamental freedoms. They face many common challenges, and they have similar vulnerabilities, including in the context of large movements. Refugees and migrants travelling alongside each other, using similar routes but for different reasons, often face similar risks and difficulties. That is why the complementary implementation of the two compacts is so critical. This high-level event provides us with an opportunity to discuss concrete ways in which the two compacts can complement each other in a range of different areas to advance the protection of refugees and migrants, including in the context of mixed movements and through the route-based approach, about which we will hear more later. So before I start a conversation with the High Commissioner for Refugees and the Director General of the International Organisation for Migration, I would just like to ask those in the audience who've indicated that they would like to make an intervention towards the end of the session to move up towards the front where we have some dedicated seating for you. So I'm delighted to be here with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, and the Director General of the International Organisation of Migration, Amy Pope, who's today appearing in her capacity as the coordinator of the UN Network on Migration. Welcome to you both. High Commissioner, to set the scene, may I invite you to give some brief introductory remarks?
Thank you very much, Jane. And as somehow the host of all this big machine here of the GRF, let me say a few things. One, that I'm greatly honored to be on this panel with Amy, with the Director General of IOM, that for all the reasons that we will explain in the next during this discussion. I'm also very honored to be on this panel moderated by Jane, who, as we're just talking to with Amy, is a real authority in matters of human mobility, and it is important also to rely on knowledge and expertise, and she represents that very, very significantly. I also want to say a little practical point. Because I am chairing the meeting and I am on the podium, I cannot do side events, really. I know there's many, but I made a firm decision from the beginning to do this one. And I'm doing another one on solutions tomorrow, because I think these are the real important things today. I mean, everything else is important. Sorry, I shouldn't discourage anybody. But these two are very, very important areas on which we need to focus. And the final thing before I say something a bit more substantive, for those of you who are here in Geneva, and maybe some of you were at a meeting where Amy and I spoke about this to our diplomatic friends a few weeks ago, I think the rumor might have gone around, let me preempt this before she says it, that there is now a marriage between IOM and UNHCR. And I want to confirm there is a marriage which is not a fusion or whatever you call it, infusion, but it is a firm intention to live together, not only in peace and harmony, but to live together productively and to really work together in these very complex challenges that we are all sharing and all facing. So I just wanted not to dispel the rumor, but to confirm it. And having said this, I want to just, I speak very briefly because we want to hear from Amy, of course, but what Jane said is very, very important. Refugees and migrants, they are two distinct groups of people, of course, certainly from our perspective, but they share many things. And first and foremost, human rights. The fundamental human rights. They are people, and so they have rights like everybody else. We celebrate this week the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration, and these people are, of course, subjects of rights like everybody else, and the same rights. And they share many vulnerabilities. They share many, how can I say, locations. They share routes and journeys and risks related to that. They share people exploiting them. That should not be forgotten. Traffickers, smugglers. And they share sometimes the same challenges and obstacles posed by states, let's face it, as they share facilities and protection shared by states. Having said all this, I think it is incumbent on me, because otherwise I don't know what you will tweet, that of course, refugees have a precise set of specific rights enshrined in the 1951 Convention and in the many other legal instruments that have been developed regionally or globally over the years, including General Assembly resolutions, Executive Committee resolutions, and so forth. So clearly, they have a construct, they benefit from a construct from which, unfortunately, many other groups that are very vulnerable cannot benefit, but that's the way it is. And it is important to preserve that construct, to uphold it. It's not always respected, but my job as High Commissioner is to defend that construct and to make a distinction. That's why we understand that there will always be a need to make a refugee status determination to determine which people fall under which set of rights. And that is an important element that we need to consider and to remember. Having said this, back to the commonalities. The commonalities also create or raise many questions because, of course, the determination of who is a refugee or who is a person in deserving of the international protection for refugees and who is not is made more complicated by the circumstances. I was, like Amy was also in the past, I was a few weeks ago in Colombia, in the Darien, and if you are there, you can see all these people moving 500,000 this year only going through the Darien between Colombia and Panama. And you can see easily that everybody there is extremely vulnerable, especially women and children. But of course, if we are to make a determination, only some of them would be recognized as refugees. So the question is what to do with the others. And this is where already you can see a division of labor and the complementarity between our two organizations. I want to stress complementarity and not competition, because there is an image that sometimes is out that we're out for competing for resources or for turf or for mandate. We're not. But I think it is important, and we have a responsibility to all of you to be clear about our respective responsibilities and to be clear about what in a growing number of situations we are now called to work together, as we do a lot in the Americas, and as we will do, I foresee, more and more also in other parts of the world.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner, for those opening thoughts and reflections. I'd now like to turn to our first question, and Director General, I'll begin with you. What does complementarity actually mean, and why is it important, and is it a new development?
First of all, It's so exciting to be here. And I want you all to know that as the Director General of the International Organization for Migration, it was critical for me and for our organization to support the Global Refugee Forum because we recognize the importance of our partnership in terms of addressing the vast needs of people around the world, which are growing by the day, right? So as Filippo has said, we had a marriage a couple of weeks ago, but it's a modern marriage, which means that we are not dependent on one another. I haven't said to you, you complete me, but 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 the idea is in a modern marriage, each partner brings their particular competencies into the relationship, and as a result, you're stronger, right? And the evidence shows that a good, solid modern marriage actually leads to better outcomes for the partnership. So that's what we're trying to achieve here, better outcomes for more people on the move. And for me, it does reflect that what I see as one of our core goals. If we do our work well at IOM, we will be strengthening protections for refugees and strengthening protections for people who are seeking asylum. So what that means is that we now see all over the world increasing numbers of people seeking asylum, right? We see it in the United States, we see it in Mexico, we see it in places like Colombia, we see it in and across Europe and Asia. The numbers are going up. But interestingly, the numbers of people when they are evaluated as to whether or not they will succeed in getting asylum, whether or not they fall under the criteria of the 1951 Convention, is not growing. So that means that increasingly people see this particular channel as their only pathway, right? And that means that it is putting pressure on the asylum systems, making it more difficult for those who will qualify for refugee status to get that status in a more timely way. And more importantly, it means that it's undermining confidence in the system. Now, I am assuming every single person in this room is a champion of the 1951 Convention. But as champions of the 1951 Convention, it is critical that we build out a range of solutions that address the needs of all people who are on the move. And importantly, to where there are opportunities to engage early on so that people can adapt to their situation at home, particularly when we're talking about something like climate change, that we engage in work that enables them to achieve that outcome, right? Because ultimately, if we do not work together in a complementary way, it means that we'll continue to overload the one channel that now exists, and it will continue to override or undermine the protections that states work so hard to put into place.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the High Commissioner for UNHCR's perspective on the same question, please.
In the interest of time, because I think we are a bit tight with time, let me say, maybe because I already said it in my opening, but just to be specific, of course, UNHCR will continue to focus on areas that are specific to the people that qualify, that are, in our opinion, deserving of international protection, the strengthening of asylum systems, access to territory to ask for asylum, increasingly, as you hear in every room in this forum, working on the inclusion of people in national services, access to jobs. And of course, we remember this is a key component of UNHCR's mandate. We will focus on solutions. And solutions could be locally integration, but could hopefully the best solution is always for people to go back safely, voluntarily, and of course, third country solutions and so forth. Now, many of these areas that are areas of work with refugees are common to other people on the move that are not refugees. I certainly think of inclusion as a very common area of work between the two organizations. I certainly think of how can I say, access to due process. Now, not everybody will succeed, but I think access should be granted to those that ask. So there are many areas where I think jointly, but in a complementary way, we can both advocate and do things. And I think nowhere perhaps more than in the area of solutions, we have a lot to share and to work together on. And so I think that, but one thing, one caveat on complementarity that I want to put forward, because this is a broad area, human mobility is a very broad area. And because the causes that push people away from their homes are becoming more complex, not less complex. And climate change, mentioned by Amy, is probably the growing one, the future biggest one. I think everybody has to understand that even in doctrinal terms, even in operational terms, this is an open discussion. And this is why Amy and I, from the beginning of her tenure, have agreed that we will keep an open line on this issue so that when there is, as inevitably there will be overlaps or maybe gaps, even worse, that we have to fill, we are in touch and we try to address, and we are asking member states to help us do that so that we remain efficient, well coordinated, and stronger together.
Many thanks, High Commissioner. May I ask you another question, which relates to the route-based approach? We've heard this term a lot, but could you explain what exactly it means and how complementarity may assist in applying this approach to address challenges and opportunities in mixed movements?
Maybe I also, I'm sure Amy will have to add, but I just want to say the term route-based approach, the other day, one of our communication colleagues told me, do you realize that nobody understands what that means? So maybe we should find a better name for that, but I think I can explain in 2 words. The idea came from the fact that in many states, and understandably, many governments focus on their borders. Of course, that's their responsibility to their own citizens. I understand that. The problem is that if in dealing with these complicated movements, you only deal with the problem when it happens at your borders, it's often too late to find solutions or to respond in a principled manner or even in a logical manner, because then a lot of other things happen, logistical, political, emotional, and it's difficult. Because these complex flows that we're talking about are really across many countries, we are encouraging government to do what seems logical, but is not always done. Look at these routes holistically, from the root cause all the way to how people are dealt with when they arrive at what could be their final destination. That's the route-based approach, which means doing a lot more things at the same time. It is building asylum systems, but not only in the last country, all along the routes. It is about what we call complementary pathways, meaning creating, like we're doing in Latin America, creating together with the US and other governments support safe pathways. It is about creating opportunities along the way. I mean, you understand all of that. So this is really what the route-based approach, if all states adopted route-based approach, sincerely, holistically, I think we would be in a better place.
100% agreed with the High Commissioner. I mean, it starts with why are people leaving in the first place? And this is actually an interesting way to look at complementarity. In my worlds, the reason why people are leaving in the first place are often development challenges because people do not have opportunities at home. And quite literally, they're looking at, am I going to starve? Do I have a way to feed my children? Do I have any future in this country? Or do I go in search of a better life? Now, in the High Commissioner's case, it's a slightly different calculation and not so easy to solve. Usually we're talking about political solutions. But when we're talking about what's driving people in the migration world, it's what development angles can we bring to respond to the situation that's at home. And also, by the way, recognizing that sometimes migration can actually be a tool for development. It is now in real life, informally, all over the world. but using it strategically as a tool for development is one way that we can respond to it. The other is to really take into account what's happening to the countries along the way. Now, I love to talk about the country of Djibouti because that country is 1 million people, 1 million people. But the country of Djibouti has more than 200,000 migrants passing through every day. Someone said that this is like thinking about in the United States having 75 million people come to the southwest border and cross up into Canada, right? To give you a sense of the scale. Djibouti also hosts a fairly significant proportionally refugee population. The fact that Djibouti is such a small country means that it necessarily is facing issues of capacity, strain on its own systems, and it's a place where governments in the region, around the world, should be looking to enhance its capacity, right? So an investment in a country like Djibouti is actually an investment in regional stability. And that's the way we're encouraging governments to look at the issue of human mobility.
Thank you very much for that response. I've got one final question to each of you, and Director General, I'll start with you. Looking ahead to the IMRF, so the equivalent of this for migration in 2026, what would you hope to see in terms of progress made in addressing some of the challenges that you've raised, and how do you think the UN system can help in that regard?
I'm going to take the advantage of the fact that it's the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights and say that where I'd like to be is a recognition that all people have human rights, right? It's important that we recognize the 1951 Convention and the particular specific protections that are inherent within that document. But that doesn't mean that everybody else can then be disregarded, or we should turn our back on the very, very real human suffering and vulnerability that now exists around the world and will only continue to grow. So whether it is protection issues that we're seeing for refugee populations, or recognizing and identifying and responding to the protection issues that we're seeing for the vast number of other people on the move, that's number one. And then number two is to really move away from this. These are migrants, these are refugees, and move toward these are people. These are people with capacity. These are people with dreams. They are people who actually are needed in a world in which 30 of the top economies around the world had labor shortages costing $1.3 trillion. So if nothing else, I want to move away from a narrative in which we think very, very narrowly about who people are and think much more broadly about the tremendous good that can come from identifying who people are and what they can bring to the table.
Thank you. High Commissioner, I'll put the last question to you. I mean, looking ahead to the next Global Refugee Forum, how can UNHCR support new creative approaches and partnerships to make the complementarity and the route-based approach a reality?
First, let's finish this forum. It's not yet done. We still have a few hours to go, but so far so good. And thank you all for participating. By the way, I would say I agree with Amy, so I don't need to repeat what she just said. Very important. I would say a corollary to that is that if migration, which is a necessity for people and states, for everybody. You know, the trick here is to make migration a win-win as opposed to a lose-lose, right? If migration could be better governed globally, not country by country, globally, asylum would breathe.
Yes.
This is the key issue here. I think this is the key issue. Because many countries actually tell me all the time, we have no problem with refugees, but all the rest is a problem, irregular movement. And then everybody gets classified under these irregular movements, and everybody gets targeted with restrictive measures that encompass, and that is where violations of the convention apply. So I think that the focus, and I'm very glad that Amy's taking leadership on this, and that we have the network of which, that Amy leads in the UN and of which UNHCR is a member, but we have also UNICEF, Human Rights, ILO, other significant agencies there. I think that we all need to make an effort from our perspectives to strengthen the global governance of migration in a manner that also fulfills the need of states that need migrants for their economies. That way, I'm not suggesting that that automatically will solve the scourge of trafficking or the complexity of mixed flows. But I am pretty sure that if it was done more deliberately, more substantively, it would improve, lighten the pressure, and give more space for people that are fleeing because of war, persecution, discrimination, and frankly, people that, may I say, I know states don't like if I say this, that will always have to adopt or go through irregular pathways, because that's the nature of flight, not driven by your choice, but because you're pushed. But if we want to reduce the global irregularity by creating more regular migration channels, we would lighten the pressure on asylum. So a big plea to governments, and I hope many initiatives out of this forum go in that direction, and I hope that they will be supported and developed.
Thank you, High Commissioner, for those remarks. And I'm not sure whether I've been the bridesmaid or the celebrant up here today, but it's been a pleasure to have the opportunity to have this important discussion with both of you. That concludes this part of the session, but I'm going to request that both our speakers remain here and invite the panelists for the next part to come and join them on the podium. While you do, I'm going to move to my new position and I'll then explain what's happening next. So as the panelists join us, what we're going to have now is a number of speakers who are presenting relevant pledges and good practices at the the local, national and regional levels in terms of the complementarity between the GCR and the GCM, as well as talking about the route-based approach to mixed movements. Each speaker will address us from the podium here. And I would request that everyone is mindful of time, just so that each person has an opportunity to present their comments in full. I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker, Alejandro Solano, who is the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs from Costa Rica.
Good afternoon. My apologies because I don't find the intervention, but I'm trying to find it. You can imagine this. Yeah. Wow. Well, let me switch to Spanish because I am the chair of the Spanish defense language in all international organizations, so I need to switch my mother tongue. So, primero que todo, quiero agradecer la referencia. Thank you.
Faster.
Faster. Bueno, quisiera rápidamente hacer mención, porque sé que estamos contra el tiempo y no es mi intención hacer lectura de una serie de valoraciones, sino más bien comentar una serie de hechos que articulan la importancia, primero que todo, y creo que el alto comisionado ha sido muy claro sobre la complementariedad entre los dos pactos. Creo que eso es un punto de principio. Aquí no hay una competencia entre los procesos de refugio y los procesos de migración, sino lo que debe haber es una complementariedad. Y a partir de ese momento es donde debemos encontrar cuáles son esas sinergias que se pueden identificar entre los dos instrumentos, porque ambos al final de cuentas lo que hacen es generar las condiciones, establecer un compromiso para que todas aquellas personas que por una u otra necesidad han tenido que dejar sus lugares de origen puedan estar debidamente protegidos o cubiertos. La condición jurídica de uno u otro es indiferente. Creo que el principio básico es el de establecer protección y es ahí la importancia y la necesidad de darle contenido y darle eficacia a estas disposiciones internacionales que, si bien es cierto, no son instrumentos vinculantes, pero que sí han establecido el compromiso de la comunidad internacional para trabajar en líneas de desarrollo. En el caso particular de Costa Rica, eh, una de las características que quiero destacar es que en el último año se ha convertido en el tercer país en el mundo en número de solicitudes de refugio. Al día de hoy tenemos aproximadamente 279,000 solicitudes pendientes de trámite y para lo cual uno de los compromisos que inclusive señalamos esta mañana es fomentar un mecanismo para acelerar el trámite de respuesta. Esto ha sido uno de los grandes desafíos y para ello quisiera precisamente agradecerle al alto comisionado que nos ha facilitado una serie de herramientas e inclusive de personal para poder darle agilidad a las respuestas a esta atención. Los desafíos en términos migratorios y de refugio, creo que no hay región en el mundo en que esté ajena, y en el caso particular de las Américas, y en nuestro caso nosotros somos un país de doble flujo, tenemos, como les he señalado, flujos de norte a sur y de sur a norte. En estos momentos, en nuestro caso, y por eso es que visualizamos esa complementariedad entre los dos pactos. Tenemos aproximadamente un número indeterminado de ciudadanos de Nicaragua que permanentemente cruzan nuestras fronteras y de los cuales el 90% solicitan bajo la figura del refugio su permanencia en el país, mientras que otro número importante de ese porcentaje de ciudadanos nicaragüenses también entran bajo la condición migratoria regular. Por otra parte, tenemos los componentes migratorios, los flujos mixtos, que cruzan la frontera sur hacia el norte en busca de llegar hacia los Estados Unidos y donde a través de una serie de articulaciones con Panamá hemos logrado establecer un flujo seguro, ordenado. Básicamente hemos establecido un sistema de desplazamiento bajo contratación de autobuses, lo cual es una figura muy sui generis, donde Costa Rica y Panamá han acordado establecer un sistema de autobuses que trasladan a los migrantes que salen desde el tapón del Darién hasta la frontera de Nicaragua en una operación compartida, de manera que le aseguramos a todos los migrantes una movilidad segura, ordenada, evitando precisamente, por una parte, combatir el tráfico de personas y por otro proveer también a estas personas de la alimentación y los tratamientos médicos necesarios, además de atender una serie de causales, sobre todo de las dificultades que enfrentan muchos de estos migrantes cuando cruzan el tapón del Darién. Y para ir terminando, quisiera señalar que estos compromisos país se visualizan no solamente en las acciones de implementación de los pactos, sino que al día de hoy hemos tratado de implementar una serie de acciones en los distintos foros en los que participamos a nivel regional, básicamente a través de la iniciativa del Marco Integral Regional de Protección y Soluciones, el Marco MIRS, que precisamente ayer tuvimos una presentación para compartir cuáles eran las acciones de los países que conformamos esta iniciativa en la región de las Américas. El otro gran proceso en el cual intervenimos es la Conferencia Regional de Migraciones, que es el marco regional en el cual se abordan estos fenómenos, y más recientemente la gestión del proceso de Quito, que es la que regula los flujos migratorios venezolanos, cuya presidencia será ejercida en el 2024 por Costa Rica y para lo cual estamos impulsando básicamente una agenda de tratamiento de los menores no acompañados como uno de los principales puntos. Finalmente, quisiera terminar con dos elementos claves que considero que son importantes en términos de cómo abordar estos compromisos. Uno es la participación activa de las comunidades de acogida, que es importante precisamente para involucrar a los actores de las sociedades, que reciben estos frutos, estos componentes, porque precisamente son comunidades pequeñas que muchas veces se ven desbordadas por estos flujos y que lo importante es que ellos se sientan también identificados, que se sientan no solo parte del problema, sino de la solución. Y hemos tratado de establecer una iniciativa con estas comunidades. Y el segundo es el de establecer precisamente esta articulación con Panamá para garantizar para los flujos migratorios mixtos una respuesta integral que no solamente sea el de proveer seguridad, sino el de proveerles atención humanitaria, que creo que es lo más importante. No dejarlos desamparados en el camino, sino que puedan sentirse acompañados por los estados en términos de salud, en términos de alimentación y sobre todo en términos de solidaridad con ese enorme desafío que implica dejar sus países de acogida. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Vice Minister. I'd now like to call upon Ambassador Omar Zniba, the permanent representative of Morocco to the UN in Geneva.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Moderator. If you allow me, I will deliver my elements in French language. I presume that it would be safe for me and probably more safe for you too. Well, Monsieur le Commissaire, Madame la Directrice Générale, honorable assistance, c'est vraiment un réel plaisir de prendre cet événement parallèle, de prendre part à cet événement parallèle de haut niveau cet après-midi, doublement important car il constitue des voies et moyens de traiter les mouvements mixtes de manière mieux coordonnée et d'explorer des voies de coopération au bénéfice d'abord des migrants et des réfugiés. La migration, en tant que phénomène naturel, est en constante croissance, avec plus de 280 millions de migrants internationaux dans le monde en cette année. De la même manière, vos équipes, Monsieur le Haut-Commissaire, anticipent des chiffres encore plus importants que ceux que vous avez annoncés hier à l'ouverture de cet important forum pour l'année prochaine et les années qui suivent. Donc, en ce sens, comment devrions-nous gérer cette mobilité si importante? Elle n'est et ne sera jamais qu'une question sécuritaire ou politique. Bien au contraire, elle porte en elle l'impératif de promouvoir et de protéger les droits de l'homme des personnes en mouvement, en particulier les plus vulnérables, migrants et réfugiés inclus. Les faits sont là, permettez-moi de les citer, vous les connaissez tous, mais c'est important de faire ces rappels cet après-midi. Les migrants en mouvement sont souvent vulnérables aux abus et aux violations des droits de l'homme. Ainsi, selon le Bureau international du travail, environ 25 millions de personnes sont victimes de travail forcé aujourd'hui dans le monde, dont de nombreux migrants, il faut le souligner. Les femmes et les enfants migrants sont particulièrement vulnérables aux violences sexuelles et à la traite des êtres humains. Selon l'UNICEF, des sources bien sûr tout à fait fiables et crédibles, les enfants représentent près de 30% des victimes de la traite des êtres humains. Aux discriminations sur les lieux d'arrivée se conjuguent les dangers des voies de passage. Les passeurs, trafiquants et autres groupes criminels organisés ont cherché à contourner les restrictions, exposant les migrants à des conditions autrement plus dangereuses, exploitation de nouvelles routes, hausse de la demande et des prix, etc., et tous les trafics qui y sont liés. Conscient de ces enjeux, mon pays, le Maroc, présente dans le cadre de ce forum son référentiel de procédure de la gestion humanisée des frontières, en tant qu'approche humaine, pragmatique et tangible pour mieux faire face aux mouvements mixtes. Ce concept innovant place le respect des droits des migrants et des réfugiés et le principe de non-refoulement au centre même de la gouvernance migratoire. Il constitue par ailleurs la colonne vertébrale du processus dit de Rabat, comme vous le savez, et qui a été lancé en particulier dans le cadre de l'approche africaine sur ces sujets-là. Le Maroc est un carrefour de civilisation, un lieu d'échange, de brassage et de passage. Il est concerné au premier chef, étant donné qu'il s'agit d'un croisement historique, géographique, mais aussi humain. Il est concerné au premier chef. Conscient de cette réalité, mon pays a été le premier État à mettre en œuvre cet engagement d'ordre moral, en abritant notamment le premier atelier régional en 2018 consacré aux premières consultations menant au lancement du guide pour une gestion humanisée des frontières, mis en place avec le Bureau du Haut-Commissaire aux droits de l'homme et le Bureau des Nations Unies contre le terrorisme. Il s'agit en particulier, pour parler de choses concrètes, de procéder de la meilleure manière notamment à la formation des agents de sécurité et de forces de l'ordre chargés de traiter la mobilité aux frontières, et en particulier lorsqu'il s'agit de la mobilité des migrants et des réfugiés. L'intégration de ce guide au niveau national, ajusté à la réalité de nos frontières, permet désormais au Maroc davantage de prendre les mesures suivantes. D'abord, l'identification, l'accueil et la prise en charge des migrants de chaque catégorie, établie sur la base d'un profilage pour détecter les personnes aux besoins spécifiques, notamment les personnes vulnérables, les mineurs non accompagnés, les demandeurs d'asile et les migrants économiques. Ensuite, il nous permet de renforcer la lutte contre le trafic des migrants et la traite des êtres humains par une intégration de garanties juridiques et judiciaires pour la protection des étrangers vulnérables dans nos dispositions juridiques et pénales nationales. Les défis auxquels nous sommes collectivement confrontés confortent la double approche adoptée par le Pacte mondial de Marrakech sur la migration. Ainsi, l'approche gouvernementale, nous en sommes tous conscients, cela est aujourd'hui un fait établi, ne peut exister en dehors de sa corollaire. La corollaire, c'est-à-dire l'approche sociétale. C'est celle-ci même qui prend forme également lors de ce forum mondial, comme on le constate bien sûr depuis hier, ici même. Par ailleurs, j'ai le plaisir cet après-midi, Monsieur le Haut-Commissaire, Madame la Directrice Générale, de répéter ce qui s'est passé hier. Nous étions dans un important side event sur la santé des migrants. Et ça aussi, c'est l'approche humaine. Et lors de cette side event qui a été organisé hier comme un pledge, l'un des pledges importants de ce forum, Monsieur le directeur général de l'OMS, notre cher ami Tedros, a indiqué que le méga pledge mené par le Maroc depuis ces 7 derniers mois sur l'inclusion des réfugiés dans le système de santé nationaux a engrangé le soutien au travers d'engagements enregistrés dans le cadre de ce forum de 140 parties prenantes, dont 27 États membres. À titre de comparaison, de 2019 à aujourd'hui, 90 pledges en relation avec ces thématiques avaient été enregistrés. Je pense que c'est aussi le succès de l'importante réunion que nous avions organisée à Rabat en juin dernier sur ce sujet, avec bien sûr l'HCR, l'OIM et l'Organisation mondiale de la santé. Je voudrais conclure aussi en disant que nous présidons actuellement le Maroc et le Salvador, le groupe des champions du pacte global de Marrakech sur la migration, et nous avons mis au centre de notre programme, qui va durer jusqu'à la fin du printemps prochain, cette question de la gestion humaine, de la migration et de la mobilité de manière générale, selon les normes, bien sûr, des droits de l'homme et des droits internationaux humanitaires. Merci de m'avoir invité cet après-midi pour partager avec vous ce que je viens de présenter, mais je voudrais à nouveau réitérer de la façon la plus forte l'engagement du Maroc, non seulement au niveau national, mais bien sûr aussi notre pays a vocation à s'exprimer, à travailler sur la scène internationale, comme vous tous cet après-midi, et je vous remercie.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador. I'd now like to invite Vittoria Zanuzzo, the Executive Director of the Mayor's Migration Council.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to share how cities are breaking silos between the two compacts. Back in 2018, while national governments met to endorse the two global compacts, the GCR and the GCM, mayors were on the sidelines. They were actually in Marrakesh, and they met to endorse the Marrakesh Mayor's Declaration, which is a joint commitment to implement the compacts in unison, together, in complementarity, not in competition. Mayors made this commitment for basically two reasons. First, mixed migration is the new reality, is the new normal for cities. 70% of all forcibly displaced people are in urban areas. 20% of all migrants are living in the biggest cities. And these figures are only going up as climate change, as you said, is going to push more people around the planet, as climate-induced migration is mostly internal, is short distance, is rural to urban. Second, mayors are fantastic multitaskers.
Yes.
They have competing demands, they have limited resources, and so they really need to build programs that address the overlapping needs of multiple residents, all residents, whether someone is a refugee, an asylum seeker, a migrant. Mayors aren't just talking about complementarity, they really are doing something about it and they're showing how it's done. In the next plenary, Mayor Rees of Bristol, on behalf of our entire delegation, will be announcing more than 100 pledges towards the two global compacts from cities representing 40 countries around the world. And these pledges are the result of the call to local action for migrants and refugees, which is a unique partnership between UNHCR, IOM, the Mayor's Migration Council, and UCLG, really to create a clear and straightforward pathway for cities to implement, to pledge towards the compacts and participate into this important progress. And of all of the pledges that we received, 60% of them are mirror pledges. They address the needs of both migrants and refugees at the same time. Why? Because mayors are multitaskers and very resourceful. So just to be concrete, a couple of examples of what we're bringing to the table. The city of San Antonio, we actually will have the mayor with us today in the US, is pledging to provide temporary shelter, essential services, and legal assistance for migrants and asylum seekers entering the country at the southern border. Or Kampala in Uganda, which is pledging to create green jobs for migrants and refugees at the same time, and is actually working with the city of Nairobi to expand the program. But while my mayors are stepping up as problem solvers, too many solutions go unfunded. So just 1.2% of all international humanitarian funding reached local actors in 2022, and only 10% of climate finance is really urban. So this is why the Mayor's Migration Council decided to participate in your call for pledges and put some skin in the game by submitting our own pledge to bring our Global Cities Fund for migrants and refugees to $50 million, starting with $25 million by 2025, because it's very catchy. But we'll get it done. This is actually a fund that we're implementing in partnership with UNHCR, IOM, and UCLG and other partners. And it's what we sometimes call our own migration multi-partner trust fund, but for cities. So I only mentioned a few pledges, but each one of them is unique. Each one of them is making a tangible difference in the lives of migrants and refugees while keeping the world on track to meet global commitments. Why? Because local actions are national successes, and there's no delivery of the Global Compact if cities do not deliver. So let us all deliver together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I just ask all remaining speakers if you could please ensure you keep to time so that we have sufficient time left for the rest of the event. I'd now like to invite Jagan Chapagan, the Secretary General of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies.
Thank you, colleagues and friends. Listening to Filippo and Amy, I was getting a little jealous that they had this marriage, and and I was thinking who I could look for as IFRC. And now just listening to the mayors, I thought this could be a very good match. Because we are also multitaskers just like you as a Red Cross. And I think for us, that complementarity really comes from the needs and the aspiration and rights of the people. Of course, the people could be labeled migrants or refugees or people on the move. You know, there are asylum seekers. Of course, there are many, many names. But at the end of the day, when you look at the fundamentals, they all need the same thing. And of course, there are some uniqueness, as both Filippo and Amy explained earlier. And I'm very glad that they can look into some of those unique aspects. And we can focus on those common, basic humanitarian needs, the dignity needs, protection needs. And that's, I think, the element that brings the complementarity, because it's really focusing on the people and seeing people as people, but not by the label they are given. You know, the label are given. Suddenly today, I become a citizen, tomorrow I become a migrant. Nothing has changed for me. But we have just given them the labels, and they suddenly become somebody else, a different person. And I think that's basically the type of issue we want to address, and we definitely multitask, because we want to look into the humanitarian needs, principled humanitarian approach to support the people. And of course, the action is to be taken at different levels. And Filippo, thank you for explaining the route-based approach, because that's one of the things we are embracing as a very important element of our contribution as a Red Cross Red Crescent network. And I'm very glad that many national Red Cross Red Crescent societies are present here today, because I visited the same migration route last year from Colombia, Darien Gap, all the way to the border with the US. And when you see people, of course, move from countries to countries, and in many places, the routes are actually well established. You can even see from the satellite where these routes are. But when people move, they have needs also when they are moving from countries of origin, many countries in transit, and then, of course, the countries of destination. And a lot of times, also, there is a sense of insecurity and mistrust with the authorities. You know, what happens? They could be arrested, they could be sent back home, their information could be shared in a certain way. And then, of course, there are gangs and violence. And as you see in the Darien Gap, incredible, terrible experiences people have to go through. And there, what we found was people generally trust that Red Cross flag or the Red Crescent flag along the way. So we established that route-based migration program along the routes, and where we call the humanitarian service points along those routes, where actually the migrants can stop, basically get basic support, sometimes just food, water, basic medical, first aid supply, but at the same time, very important informations. Because a lot of times migrants do not know what they are heading towards. And getting those basic information provides them a massive protection, just knowing what may be coming along the way. And the most important element I saw in Panama, just before the border to Costa Rica, I was talking to the minister yesterday, was the psychosocial support. When people are going through this horrendous experience of rape and exploitation, sexual harassment, and anything you can think of, the terrible thing people can go through, particularly women and children. And when they reach out of those jungles, getting that basic support seems extremely critical, and that's basically where we are focusing. There's a lot I can say, but I want to focus on, of course, the three places. This is what you had been looking for. We could say many, but I'm keeping these places very simple, because I would like to place what we can deliver. Not the places which look nice today, but then tomorrow we forget because we know we cannot deliver them. So these three places are simple, and it's our commitment from the IFRC to deliver, and we will deliver. Next time we meet, I can say we deliver. The first one is absolutely continue to invest on these humanitarian service points that saves lives, provides safety and dignity to all the people on the move. And this is something we want to strengthen further, not only in Latin America, but also in Africa. And that's the migration route I followed this year, just to see walking with the migrants and refugees when they were taking that journey. The second one, and much more complicated, also politically and legally, is how do we actually do the similar thing on the sea route? Of course, in Mediterranean, we already have Ocean Viking ship. We are partnering with the SOS Mediterranean, but this is much more complex and politically extremely hot potato, particularly here in Europe. But it's extremely important that we help the people on the sea route, and of course also help them after they have been rescued. And this is one area we want to do more and better. And the third is really getting those insights from the communities with our Red Cross, Red Crescent societies, the communities and their volunteers, to getting those insights of real action, not just the words, and help colleagues like Filippo and Amy shape the policy agendas globally, so we can actually have updated and relevant policies. So these are the three commitments from our side. And I think the real test of us and this conference would be that tomorrow our words are followed by real actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. I'd now like to turn to Julien Boucher, the Director General of OFPRA in France, the French Office for the Protection of Refugees and Stateless Persons.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais m'exprimer moi aussi en français, donc je vous laisse le temps de de prendre vos écouteurs si besoin. Monsieur le haut-commissaire, Madame la directrice générale, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers collègues panélistes, je suis très heureux de l'opportunité qui m'est donnée d'intervenir sur ce sujet des complémentarités entre la mise en œuvre du pacte mondial sur les réfugiés et celle du pacte mondial sur les migrations. En effet, même s'il est fondamental de toujours réaffirmer la spécificité de la condition juridique des réfugiés, tout praticien du domaine de l'asile et des migrations sait que sur leur parcours, réfugiés et migrants sont généralement confrontés aux mêmes réalités et malheureusement aux mêmes risques, notamment en ce qui concerne le respect de leurs droits fondamentaux. À l'Office français de protection des réfugiés et apatrides que je dirige, nous le constatons tous les jours en recueillant les récits d'exil des demandeurs d'asile dans le secret de nos salles d'entretien. Et c'est l'une des raisons parmi d'autres qui justifie une approche globale de la question des migrations. Et l'action européenne et internationale de la France en la matière est attentive à cette nécessité. Je voudrais en donner ici quelques exemples. Au niveau multilatéral, on peut mentionner dans la période récente les travaux conduits dans le cadre de la présidence française du Forum mondial sur la migration et le développement, dont le 14e sommet se tiendra ici même à Genève au mois de janvier. En effet, si ces travaux ont mis l'accent notamment sur la question de l'impact du changement climatique sur les mobilités humaines, la présidence française a également fait figurer parmi ses priorités la promotion des voies de migration régulières, la protection des droits fondamentaux des migrants, notamment les plus vulnérables, le cas des femmes et des enfants a été évoqué, et la lutte contre la traite des êtres humains. De même, au niveau européen, les autorités françaises ont promu, dans le cadre des négociations du pacte sur la migration et l'asile, qui sont entrées dans leur dernière phase, des solutions équilibrées, respectueuses des droits et soucieuses de lutter contre les trafics illicites de migrants et la traite des êtres humains. Et c'est dans le même état d'esprit qu'au niveau national, le gouvernement français a souhaité l'élaboration d'une stratégie interministérielle ambitieuse en matière de migration et de développement, une stratégie fondée sur les 5 piliers du plan d'action conjoint de la Valette adopté en 2015, qui constitue le cadre de référence pour l'action européenne en matière de coopération avec les pays partenaires sur l'ensemble du champ migratoire. Et l'un des axes de cette stratégie concerne ainsi le respect des droits fondamentaux des migrants et notamment l'accès à la protection internationale. C'est dans ce cadre que s'inscrit la coopération française en matière de renforcement des capacités d'asile, coopération qui vise à permettre aux premiers pays d'accueil des réfugiés d'assumer pleinement leurs responsabilités en la matière, en accordant la protection nécessaire aux personnes qui remplissent les conditions pour l'obtenir. Alors, l'Office français de protection des réfugiés et apatrides est investi de longue date dans cette coopération et nous nous sommes ainsi engagés dès 2019 à participer au mécanisme de soutien aux capacités d'asile mis en place lors du premier Forum mondial sur les réfugiés. À ce titre, nous avons mis en œuvre notamment des programmes de coopération qui ont concerné dans un premier temps le Niger et désormais le Tchad. L'objectif de notre action est de s'assurer de la complémentarité de ces dispositifs de coopération en matière de soutien aux capacités d'asile avec les autres aspects de la coopération française en matière de migration et de développement dans une logique de partenariat globaux avec les pays concernés. Et c'est dans cet état d'esprit que la France a renouvelé au cours de ce forum son engagement dans le mécanisme de soutien aux capacités d'asile, qui vient compléter ses autres engagements visant à favoriser l'accès à la protection dans les premiers pays d'accueil, notamment la réinstallation et les voies complémentaires que sont par exemple les couloirs humanitaires et le programme prometteur des couloirs universitaires qui est promu par le Haut Commissariat. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much for those remarks. Our final speaker in this section is Emilia Saiz, the Secretary General of the United Cities and Local Governments.
Well, thank you very much. Also very happy to be one of the partners of this very open but sound marriage on behalf of local and regional governments and the organized constituency. What we would like to bring to the table beyond the pledges and the commitments that my colleague Tori Sanuso has proposed is the notion that if we really want this agenda to be an agenda of people, we need to also transform it into an agenda of neighbors. And what it entails to be an agenda of neighbors is actually having service provision that is centered on human rights. For that service provision to be put in place, we need a different type of investment, but it's the only way that we are going to ensure that migration is better managed and that those pathways and the root causes of migration are addressed in time, with time, and not as a crisis. And so the proposal that as organized constituency for the different processes at international level we would like to bring is that beyond the complementarity between the two packs, which I think is in a very good health and that we are all working towards, we bring some of this issue also to the localization of the 2030 agenda and to the Summit for the Future. And so that is the commitment that we bring to this table from local and regional governments. And since we are over time, I will not go into details, but I will invite you all to come to room number L or letter L, because we will be talking about it in the first ever local and regional governments day of the Refugee Forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to turn to the next section of this afternoon's session, where we have a number of planned interventions from the floor. I'll call upon each person to come up to the lectern and speak, and again request that you are mindful of time. On this screen here, there will be a little countdown. So the first intervention is from Australia.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner and Director General, and to all of the panellists. It's been great hearing your contributions. We're really pleased to see the UNHCR and IOM working together to address the challenges posed by mixed migration flows. And we agree that promoting safe, orderly and regular migration can alleviate pressure on asylum systems, thereby helping to realise the objectives of both of the global compacts. To this end, Australia is pleased to commit up to $2 million in softly earmarked funding to support UNHCR and IOM to work together to support refugees' access to safe labour migration pathways as part of the whole-of-route approach to managing mixed flows. We look forward to a co-design process to determine how best to make an impact and grow refugee labour mobility to scale. If we get this right, displaced individuals will not have to choose between their vulnerability and their talent, but rather they will be given greater agency and allowed to create their own futures. Thank you.
Thank you, as an Australian, thank you in particular. I'd now like to invite Canada.
La France, je vais commencer en français, donc si vous voulez mettre vos écouteurs, ça irait mieux. C'est un défi qu'on a au Canada de façon quotidienne, alors c'est pas nouveau. Le Canada est fier de soutenir la mise en œuvre des deux pactes mondiaux et nous accueillons chaleureusement votre engagement à travailler ensemble là où les pactes se rejoignent. Ces pactes sont des outils essentiels pour orienter nos réponses collectives aux mouvements de population mixtes. Nous sommes encouragés par l'approche globale adoptée à l'échelle de vos établissements, laquelle reconnaît la collaboration nécessaire pour atteindre ces objectifs. J'aimerais donner quelques exemples de la façon dont le Canada travaille avec le HRM, avec le HCR et l'OIM et la mise en œuvre de ces pactes. Le Canada octroie 21 millions de dollars pour faciliter le travail de l'OIM visant à soutenir les réfugiés afghans en Asie centrale et au Pakistan. We're obviously talking about a modern marriage, so it's time for other people to bring the dowry, and that's what these pledges are. That's what these pledges are for, and I do recognize that. I'm now switching into English. We're also funding the IOM's efforts to address climate mobility in collaboration with the government of Mexico. The IOM will develop tools to collect data on migration, the environment, and climate change to help inform policymaking. Canada está adoptando medidas concretas para abordar los problemas de migración y protección en el hemisferio occidental. Entre ellas figura nuestra iniciativa de acoger a 15,000 inmigrantes de las Américas mediante vías seguras y regulares por motivos humanitarios. My Spanish stinks, so I hope the English caught up to what I said. But briefly, as part of our Western Hemisphere undertaking, we will bring 15,000 migrants from the Americas. A lot of it's well underway through safe and regular pathways on a humanitarian basis. We also support the work of the new safe mobility offices in the region, the nascent ones that we need more work on, and are grateful to the IOM, UNHCR in the United States and Spain for their close collaboration on this initiative that I will hope will blossom. And in closing, we wish you both success as you deepen collaboration through organizations given the complementary nature of the global complex. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and you've put me to shame in speaking only English today. I'd now like to invite Chad.
Bonjour à tous, désolé de se présenter avec la machine, je n'ai pas pu tirer la machine, le discours à temps. Et j'aimerais préciser à M. le Haut-Commissaire qu'au Tchad, les HCR et la Sénat, qui est une institution gouvernementale, nous constituons un couple. Et nous voyons qu'il y a une troisième entité qui vient s'inviter. Et donc, je pense que c'est toujours un plus dans le cadre de notre noble mission. Monsieur le Haut-Commissaire, Madame la Directrice Générale de l'OIM, Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants des différentes délégations, Madame la modératrice, chers participants, j'ai l'honneur de partager avec vous quelques points relatifs au mouvement mixte au Tchad. Le Tchad est un carrefour, pays d'asile pour les uns, de destination et de transit pour les autres, n'échappe pas au phénomène des mouvements mixtes dont les réfugiés encadrés par les instruments juridiques internationaux et la loi portant sur l'asile en République du Tchad adoptée en 2020. Le Tchad a adopté le décret d'application de la loi d'asile qui renforce l'environnement de protection et offre un éventail de droits aux réfugiés en pleine urgence du Soudan en avril 2023. Tout un symbole, Monsieur le Commissaire. Étant donné que les ressources diminuent ces dernières années, les réfugiés établis depuis de longues durées sur notre territoire, le nombre s'est vu augmenter avec la récente crise humanitaire d'avril 2023, font des mouvements à l'intérieur du pays, au-delà des sites et au-delà vers les sites aurifères à l'extrême nord du Tchad. Le Tchad est un pays transit pour le mouvement mixte. Nous avons constaté avec le HCR une augmentation du nombre de personnes traversant le Tchad pour rejoindre la Méditerranée. Au premier semestre 2023, sur plus de 5500 personnes interviewées dans le cadre du mouvement mixte, 7% ont des besoins de protection internationale. Aussi, l'on constate une augmentation du nombre de personnes de nationalité soudanaise qui passent par la Libye pour rejoindre l'Italie. De janvier à août 2023, nous avons une augmentation de 150%. Ceux qui passent par la Tunisie pour l'Italie ont augmenté de 17 912% entre 2022 et 2023. Pour répondre à ces réalités opérationnelles, nous allons lancer, avec le soutien de nos partenaires traditionnels, l'OIM, le HCR, un guichet unique à la frontière est du Tchad dans la ville de Tiné, qui accueille les réfugiés, les demandeurs d'asile et aussi des migrants. Cela permet d'identifier ceux ayant un besoin de protection internationale et de les référer pour des actions appropriées. Les partenariats avec la France que nous allons... Le partenariat avec la France que nous saluons au passage nous permettra de renforcer nos procédures d'asile, sera un élément essentiel, devant faciliter le traitement des demandes d'asile au nouveau guichet unique. De même, nous saluons également l'Italie qui soutient la mise en œuvre de ces guichets. De tout ce qui précède, le Tchad profite de cette occasion pour solliciter l'appui de la communauté internationale en général et celui des partenaires techniques et financiers que l'OIM et les HCR en particulier, pour un soutien conséquent dans le cadre des solutions durables aux réfugiés, pour asseoir l'intégration locale et lutter contre les mouvements irréguliers en créant des opportunités d'emploi pour ces personnes. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to invite Germany to the podium.
UNHCR, IOM, you have been setting the scene. Germany also likes your modern marriage a lot. And we appreciate you for your efforts in supporting the complementary implementation of both compacts more coherently. Thank you very much for that. Several of our pledges to the 23 GRF contribute to the implementation of both compacts and are mutually reinforcing each other, which is important. Let me give you two examples. Our pledge to the right to education and inclusion of refugee children in national education system contributes to both GCM objectives 15, provide access to basic services for migrants, and GCR objective 2, refugee self-reliance. In our joint pledge with the Action Network on Forced Displacement for the protection against gender-based violence, all activities are equally important to both girls and women, irrespective of their status as refugee or migrant. So it's delivering to both. At the same time, there will be contributing to the achievement of objectives of both compacts and the guiding principles, which is gender responsiveness, which is very important to us. Let me assure that Germany will remain committed to the implementation of both compacts, and we will contribute to further strengthening coherent approaches that benefit both refugees and migrants. Thank you very much. Merci, gracias, danke.
Thank you to Germany. I'd now like to invite a member of the EU Parliament to the lectern.
Je vais parler aussi en français et pour commencer, nous nous célébrons votre mariage. Ça, c'est évident. Tout d'abord, il est indéniable que les réfugiés et les migrants empruntent souvent les mêmes itinéraires. Ils font face à des risques similaires, à des défis similaires. Alors, dans nombreux des cas inclus, on peut dire que les frontières entre ces deux catégories peuvent être floues. Hein. Un déplacement, c'est plus volontaire, l'autre, c'est moins volontaire, OK, mais ils ont tous besoin de même, des droits humains, des protections, etc. Non? Alors, à propos de ça, je voudrais lancer une réflexion ouverte, que peut-être c'est un peu trop courageuse, même peut-être c'est téméraire. Si ça suffit avec la coopération étroite entre les deux organisations, ou peut-être on peut ouvrir seulement comme une réflexion, considérer la possibilité, il faut repenser l'architecture des Nations Unies à niveau général. On doit commencer pour les conseils de sécurité qui reflètent, au Parlement européen, on a traité beaucoup sur ça, qui reflètent la réalité d'il y a 70 années, 70 années, pas la réalité du monde actuel. Alors, dans cette reconsidération de l'architecture des Nations Unies en général, on pourrait considérer, par exemple, la fusion entre ACNUR et l'Organisation internationale de la migration. Je dis ça pour dire une chose un peu provocative, hein, rupturiste. Peut-être ça, c'est pas amour, peut-être c'est cannibalisme. Hein, alors, je le laisse. J'ai un ami qui toujours a défendu que le cannibalisme, c'est l'étage supérieur de l'amour, c'est le niveau supérieur de l'amour. Mais on laisse ça. Pour finir, vous l'avez dit, il est essentiel d'offrir des voies d'immigration légale pour faciliter le travail sur l'asile. Si on fait plus forte, plus solide la gestion de la migration, il y a un bénéfice indirect pour les réfugiés. Et finalement, pour respecter les temps, penser les causes profondes. Pour agir en origine, il faut penser les causes qui font les gens quitter leur domicile de manière involontaire, les conflits, la pauvreté, la violation des droits de l'homme. Et c'est ça les cadres finaux dans lesquels il faut penser cette complémentarité. Alors, c'est seulement cette provocation et merci beaucoup pour m'inviter.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to call on UNDP.
Thank you, Madam Adams, Your Excellencies and distinguished guests. UNDP views the two global compacts through the lens of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda and its goals. In 2009, in fact, and I think many of you will know this, UNDP published a Global Human Development Report, which really, I think, highlighted the spirit of this panel. In that, the key message was that a complementarity of approaches to migration and displacement can really harness human mobility as a driver of development. UNDP's human mobility approach seeks to maximize human development outcomes for people on the move, which belief dovetails very much with IOM's and UNHCR strategies on working with development actors. We believe three aspects are crucial for this complementarity. Firstly, we must acknowledge that with the right policies in place, both economic migrants, refugees, and IDPs, and their receiving communities contribute to sustainable development. For example, UNDP works closely with governments and partners to create a policy environment in which people on the move can fill labor and skills gaps while transferring knowledge and remittances home. Complementarity between governments' implementation of the two compacts can certainly bring to scale positive development impacts of human mobility. Secondly, we believe that a gender perspective must be incorporated into humanitarian and development action within the frameworks of both compacts, not only under the umbrella term of vulnerable groups, but also to highlight women on the move's role as main caregivers as well as agents of change. And thirdly, climate-induced mobility is at the core of the complementarity between both compacts. And we see this definitely in light of the recent COP28 meetings. Sudden and slow onset events will increasingly translate into population movements. Climate change constitutes an adverse driver of migration and a potential source of conflicts, thus leading to more displacement. Looking ahead, mitigation and adaptation programs must collectively be tailored to the needs and specific vulnerabilities of people on the move. UNDP is highly committed to support both the GCR and GCM. We look forward to even stronger partnerships with the happy couple and wishing you a fruitful marriage. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd now like to call on UNICEF.
Excellencies, distinguished partners, UNICEF isn't just pleased, but frankly relieved to see this progress towards taking place on complementarity between the GCM and the GCR, hopefully leading to a situation that avoids children falling through the cracks of different systems. A child is a child, no matter why she leaves home, where she comes from, where she is, or how she got there. Being a child is their primary status, regardless of her or her parents' legal status. As children move, their legal status may change, but none of that affects the child's rights under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, to protection, to care, to all of the support and services that the child needs to thrive. Both the GCR and the GCM are quite clear on children's rights, and both of them recognize children's best interests as a primary consideration. The work to advance complementarity is important to help governments ensure that children's rights are protected at all times throughout their journey and that no groups of children are excluded. To this end, UNICEF has established strategic collaboration frameworks with both UNHCR and IOM. And UNICEF's pledges for this GRF and the multi-stakeholder initiatives that we're part of on child rights, on education, child protection, social protection, health, statelessness, ending child immigration detention, data inclusion, and meaningful child and youth participation, they're just as applicable to migrant children as they are for refugee children. And it's in children's and states' best interests to ensure that no child falls through the cracks, that all children are visible and accounted for, that every child is protected, that no child is detained, that borders, classrooms, and reception centres are safe for children, that families can stay together or reunite quickly, and that communities are supported to welcome and integrate children and families who join them. Just to conclude, complementarity isn't just a word, it's a mindset. And so by making mirror pledges that speak to both the GCR and the GCM, states recognize children first and foremost as children without labels. Thank you very much.
Thank you to UNICEF. I'd now like to call on the platform on disaster displacement.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, climate change has been mentioned on several occasions today. Climate change, in fact, is a term that links the two compacts. The GCR recognizes that those forcibly displaced across borders in disaster contexts have protection needs. It mentions measures such as temporary protection or humanitarian stay agreements. And these are tools that feature very prominently in the GCM. Together with other tools, they are likely to protect persons displaced across borders in the context of sudden and slow onset disasters and the adverse effects of climate change. We at the platform on disaster displacement have partnered with UNHCR to develop a policy brief on this issue. The brief is available online in the back of the room. I'll also launch it later this afternoon at the Speaker's Corner. What we do is showcasing that many humanitarian and migration measures have already been adopted by states. They permit the admission and stay of persons leaving their countries in disaster contexts. Of course, refugee law always will play a limited role. But what we also have found is that in several countries, courts increasingly recognize that persecution can also take place in disaster contexts. And here we identify several scenarios where the 1951 Convention actually is applicable. Addressing disaster displacement demands the use of a comprehensive toolkit, not just one single instrument or one legal tool. In other words, there is a critical need for coherent and complementary application of the two compacts. However, we found the use of existing tools is very often random and hard to predict. And among others, we recommend to develop guidance. Very happy that the Calder Center from an academic perspective already started this work. And we at PDD, we stand ready to support UNHCR, IOM, the Migration Network, and others in their endeavors to strengthen the complementarity of the two compacts in order to better protect people displaced across borders in the context of disasters and adverse effects of climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the PDD. Our final intervention comes from the International Detention Coalition.
Good afternoon, everyone. Buenas tardes. I'm Carolina from the International Detention Coalition, and we're the main movement working on the issue of immigration detention and promoting alternatives. And I have to say, like many others, I'm extremely, as a migrant myself from Colombia, but also as a person who has been working for decades with migrants and refugee rights, I'm particularly pleased with this cooperation, this marriage. And I think you will agree with me that actually these global compacts don't matter very much if they stay like that and if they don't have an impact on the lives of migrants and refugees. And that will be really the measure of our success with regards to these documents. So complementarity is a key issue with regards to this, because it will enable protection, rights, and coordination, and it will avoid duplication and politics. So I'm very happy to see this happening like that. And one of those key areas of complementarity or commonality is the issue of detention, because detention has devastating impacts on both migrants and refugees. And alternatives to detention is recognized by both global compacts as one of the areas that we really need to make progress on. So as part of the UN Network on Migration, we have the Working Group on Alternatives to Detention with UNHCR, and with UNICEF and working very closely with IOM. And we have this multi-stakeholder pledge. We're very happy to see momentum on this pledge on ending child detention and on progressing on alternatives to detention. And our idea is to continue building on the work in each global compact. So what we achieve here with the states, we hope to continue then going to the IMRF and working to progress on alternatives to detention. So thank you very much, and great to see this happening.
Thank you very much. Well, we're now just a few minutes away from the end of this session, and I'd like to invite the High Commissioner to respond to what we've heard this afternoon.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you all. And thank you especially, thanks especially to those who have made very significant pledges. This is, the spirit of the GRF, and I think it's very much, it's important, it's appreciated, it's concrete. I have 3 or 4 points that are a bit miscellaneous, but are really picking up on some of what has been raised. First, that of course, let me reiterate what many have said. The 2 pacts, it's not just the 2 organizations that are complementary. The pacts are complementary too. The pacts are toolboxes. I always call them toolboxes. The pact is not a treaty or a convention. The pacts are practical toolboxes for states and also other actors to use, to adopt, to inspire themselves from. And I think so many of the things of the 2 pacts that were written at the same time, remember, often with the same people involved in both of them, many of the things, many of the articles of the text of the pact is meant to be complementary and to be implemented in a complementary way. The second thing on another front, and I was inspired by listening to some of you, by Jaga, by others, when we talk about root-based, and I should have mentioned earlier, this famous root-based, we should not forget a fundamental element where we are really joined up, which is rescue, and which is people risking their lives, be it at sea or in deserts or other places. That's, saving lives has no categories. Yeah. And really is, I think there is this, maybe this is our pledge, Amy, that we will redouble efforts. We're not a rescue organizations, but we support those who do, and we encourage governments to pay attention to that vital function. The third point I wanted to make is that, I heard a lot, as I often do, that, these categories are categories, and we shouldn't box people into labels. And absolutely, we all agree that children are children. But refugee children have rights that need to be leveraged. And that's the important things. If we say, everybody's the same, then we lower the defense of the children instead of taking advantage of a space where they do have protection. Let's use that protection. I think it's important. So we have to be careful when we talk about this. Yes, everybody has human rights. That's fundamental. But yes, also let's recognize which rights exist, because those we need to cling to them and preserve them, and then develop rights and application of rights for the others as well. That's a very important thing. And by the way, linked to that is my next point, which is that, and this is a marriage with some prenuptials. And I think one fundamental prenuptial agreement is that UNHCR will always fiercely defend the space of refugee protection, as enshrined in the convention and in the other instruments. And by the way, those instruments are broad. We should not also make the mistake of interpreting them too narrowly. It's just persecution, because otherwise, you limit and limit, and you give ammunition to those that want to narrow, not broaden the convention. And especially when you add the Cartagena Declaration, the OAU Convention, European legislation, General Assembly resolution, the body of law is quite vast and encompasses many areas that are maybe less easy to define, but are there and applicable to modern situations. So I'm not trying to expand the turf, Believe me, we don't need that. But it's really to say, let's try to maximize what is available to expand those protection. And finally, I am always, we can always explore a merger, but one thing at a time. Let us test a bit the marriage first, and then we'll talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner. I understand that you might need to leave. So I'd like to invite the Director General to respond and see if she accepts the terms of your prenup.
Yeah, I just want to say I didn't see the prenup in advance. So look, ladies and gentlemen, we all know that at this moment in time, we're fighting for whatever rights that we can get for this group of people, migrants, refugees, people who are effectively have no voice, who are the first to be disregarded, have often no vote, and so are easily demonized wherever we are in the world, north or south. And so that's the bottom line. When we talk about complementarity, it's ultimately a commitment that when it comes to serving the needs of people on the move, we will leave no one behind. Whatever tools we have available to us, whatever conventions exist, whatever rights exist, it's a commitment that together we are going to serve more people in more ways, more fiercely. So thank you very much.